I'm not good at swimming. I'm not good at swimming. We're not breathing for you. Welcome to Kyle and Nick on Film. We're talking Don't Breathe. All right, welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoToFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick for the St. Paul Filmcast, and today we're going to talk about Don't Breathe. And please, thanks for listening, thanks for watching. If you're new, it's simply just a review show and hoping entice you to watch and maybe agree, disagree. Please check out our Patreon for options and join the team members, be part of the conversation, as well as tell your friends about the show, like and subscribe, and also, enjoy watching.
Enjoy watching. And today, we are talking Don't Breathe, which was I think it was one of my favorite films from the year it came out in 2016. But it basically follows three Detroit thieves who break into the house of a blind man with a hefty stash of money with hopes of escaping their station in life. Soon, though, they discover that this blind man is not only capable of defending himself, but his home and his money as well, and he harbors secrets of his own. And they quickly realize that getting out alive is far tougher than just breaking in.
So one of the first interesting things about the film is we do the differences between Stephen Lang's character and the three criminals. Mm-hmm. And what we do is, beginning of the movie, you show a large-scale town. I think maybe on a drone, do a large scale. And then we close up of his crime. And then we do the opposite, which is, for them, we do the close-up of this crime, and then we go large scale. I love contrast. Always point out contrast. But here, I like Stephen Lang, who I probably know him more playing generals in Civil War army movies, such like God and Generals and Gettysburg. And here, after Avatar, I think this is after Avatar, gets a little bit of a little top billing in this film.
Well, and I had become aware of Stephen Lang through Avatar. That was the first big role that I saw him in that I felt was memorable. Because, I'd say what you will about Avatar, but General Quaritch is a very memorable character. What I also really liked him in is he's very well... he has a great performance, even though it's very subtle, very unseen in the movie Mortal Engines. It's a CG performance that he actually has.
Got it, yeah, okay. I need to see that.
You don't need to see it. But he's great in it. But the film for me was very interesting in that it's a film about reversal. And this is what Fede Alvarez, director of the film, had said, was that he kind of wanted it again, like every home invasion thriller is about the people who are being invaded, not the invaders. And also that, every every kind of a film is like gives their villain extra powers, like every horror film, but this is one where we took things away from our villain, and he's still just as scary. So he kind of wanted to challenge himself with that. Of course, Fede Alvarez became famous after making the 2013 Evil Dead film, which I argue is not a remake, but a sequel. But he became famous for this film because it was so bloody, so gory, so over the top.
With mysticism and demons.
Oh, yeah. And so his big challenge, much like Joss Whedon's doing the episode of Hush for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, was to do the opposite. I.e., take away the blood, take away the focus on shock value, take away the kind of like retread that we've seen and do something we've never seen before. And I think he does that extremely well in this film.
So it's all about reversing the stereotypes of what we are seeing as, and it's actually challenging the director herself of, okay, I did a gory splash and massacre movie with Evil Dead. Mm-hmm. Let's subtract that and go back to a little more grounded realism and see if I can create a sense of horror with that. Mm-hmm. All about reversing.
Yep, and it kind of feels like a squash together of two films we've actually talked about before. It's kind of like Panic Room meets A Quiet Place.
Oh my God,
These kind of elements of like, and even like, there's a lot of similarities to Panic Room. I saw this in a few other people's reviews too. Is like some of the just like the overall look of the characters just kind of like matches some of the looks in Panic Room
slightly.
But then you also have that incredibly tense, cannot speak for fear of dying, like we had in A Quiet Place. And this is another one of those movies, just like A Quiet Place. I saw both these in theaters when they came out, and it was one of the best movie theater experiences I've had in the last decade, purely because everybody shut up and watched the movie, which was great because it was kind of like, when, especially at A Quiet Place, I was in that theater packed opening night, and anyone who spoke, like,
no, I had the same experience. Well, I should have had the same experience. Like, anybody ate popcorn noisily, we all turned to look at him like, shut up.
Yeah, like, it's gross, but like, I had popcorn.
You had to like dissolve the popcorn.
Yeah, I like put it in my mouth and I was like...
You had to dissolve it in your mouth. But yeah, it's emphasis of, you have like a prop, keys, opening up, escapism. So you have a lot of this, like, I need to get out. and you're trapped, you're confined physically, somebody mentally, somebody or just environmentally. They want to get out of Detroit. All of them want to escape. They don't really have jobs to do. This is a way of getting out.
Yeah.
It's breaking in. I love this. It's all about contrast.
Yeah, and what I like that we get, our three leads are doing bad things to people, but they're doing it in a way where, like, we're kind of unsure how we should feel, because we want them to be successful, because we want them to get out of their bad situation in life.
No, you almost like Panic Room. We kind of feel bad for the bad guys, some of them. Right.
But it's also like, Fede Alvarez did a great job with his co-screenwriter, Rodo Sayagas. They worked out a screenplay that kind of covers its own tracks a little bit. It's like you have these parts of movies where you're like, how did they break into that house? But in this film, it's a simple line of dialogue. His dad works for the security company, and like that's how they pick
have like the prop. Yeah.
And I like that it showcases how simple one line of dialogue can be to course correct something that seems over the top silly, and course corrects it into incredibly serious.
Yes. And also they did great with dialogue.
Yeah.
The great dialogue, because you understand there's a lot of it's almost native local dialogue they talk about.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem like a lot, even though you do a lot of exposition, but it seems that they live in the environment how they speak.
Yeah. And it's also like the dialogue is so important because there's so little of it once the film gets rolling. Yeah. And if you watch the runtime of the movie, I think it's somewhere around like the 10-minute mark, they start going into the house. Like it's not a question of like,
even though it seems slow.
Yeah, it's a nice, slow buildup of like what's going on. You get all that information packed in, and then about 10, 15 minutes into the movie, you are in the house, in the story, like the thick of the whole thing. It's an incredibly tight first act that gets you just rollicking on into that movie.
Another thing about how they made this movie is there's a lot of close-ups. Mm-hmm. I mean, really, just a lot of...
You can only fit the camera there.
Right. So there's a lot of, claustrophobic, like we talk about a Clockwork Orange's confined space. Mm-hmm. This is also very much a lot of confined space. And you don't see a lot of, you have opening shots of like the town and everything, but it's still confined to that town. Mm-hmm. There's really no way, you try to overly prepare that you're trapped in this environment.
Well, yeah, and I think the only way you can get away with that close-up work is by the not the simplicity of it, I don't want to use that term, but like the simple choice of that really incredible long shot that's done right when they get into the house, which reminds me a lot of the long shots in Panic Room. Right. They get in the house and they lay out the entire home, and they do a lot of setup too. You pass by the walls where there's spaces where you could see that there was a cross there that's not there anymore. You see the lock on the door to the staircase. Like you see these things where it's like, what's going on here with all these little setups and payoffs? But you also get a space that you know exactly where the rooms are, how they lead into each other. It's almost like they give you a map when you walk into the movie so you can track them throughout this house. Because it's a small house. And if you don't have a good track of what's going on, you will lose your viewers.
So I say, like, strong colorization in this movie based on where you are. There's a lot of warm blue, white almost. And I think anytime you say don't breathe, I think you even put it in the poster of like the orange or very bluish. Until you get to the third act, big the reveal. Mm-hmm. But you emphasize a lot of influence of this movie, and I wrote down my notes because I think the third act also references a lot of movies, because it's very much like Silence of the Lambs' third act. People Under the Stairs, very much of, I see a lot of that, and also the Spanish movie Record.
Oh, yeah.
So it's very much like those kind of movies all mixed together. So if you are very horror movie savvy, you'll see a lot of the references. Like, oh, I remember that. It's kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and not getting into too many of the reveals, I felt a lot of like Girl with the Dragon Tattoos, kind of like the way that film was shot, utilizing here. I'm talking about the Fincher one. Fincher one, that he kind of like utilized that kind of shot composition, that lighting, that color choice, very prevalent in the movie.
I don't know if they use gels or they just use the color process.
Yeah, I
probably
don't know.
Do both.
It's probably that case. I didn't get to watch like a whole lot of behind the scenes stuff, but I was just incredibly like taken aback by the visual appeal of the film. There's another element too where when our blind man, you're not giving a name, so we're just gonna keep calling him that. When our blind man Stephen Lang is in the film and he's controlling the light sources. There's a lot of that, like, how much light do we have in these scenes? He's aware of how to break the bulbs, or aware of where, like, the switches are to turn things off. Like, he's kind of like blind Rambo, just kind of in his house, just taking care of stuff. And what I really appreciate about that, though,
true. I just never realized
is
that.
I think this film goes a step past Quiet Place in terms of its its ingenuity, because not only does it play with the sound sources, it plays with the light sources too, but it never feels too dark.
No, and I give credit to sound mixing, sound editing, especially when you do a lot of movie that's a lot of quiet, because that's a deceiving point of sound is you're gonna have to really work tediously, meticulously to get the creaks of the steps, the TV, the noises in the back, and so not only that, but apply depth to the sound as well. That's all manufactured in a room, right, when you're editing. So good. Probably one of the best sound mixed horror movies.
Yeah, and the way it works within a surround sound environment. I was watching it yesterday with the surround sound turned all the way up, and I was just like, I gotta see it the way it was intended to be seen, and yeah, just like the placement of sounds where it's like they've got the correct volume for the depth that you're working with, and it's just really incredible because that sound is your dialogue. I mean, that is what you are using to tell your story.
Right, the sound mixing, everything, right, is going to enhance what you can't say.
Yeah, and speaking of things you can't say, Stephen Lang, 13 lines of dialogue in this movie, and yet he is a force of terror throughout the whole thing. And I think that showcases, again, Stephen Lang should have been a bigger actor for more of his life. But, thankfully, I think this is almost like a breakout role for him, because nobody knew who he was. Even in Avatar, not as much.
Who the heck is this guy, right?
Yeah.
Who the heck is
but this is like a breakout role for him that just makes him one of the most memorable horror movie villains, I guess, of all time in one movie.
Exactly. It's a lot like a character. You can do a lot with characters with limited things that you can do. You don't have a lot of dialogue, but there's things with your physicality, with movements and stuff that you could do. And like I said, when you mentioned that this is all about reversing, and I love when you talk about contrast. Well, here at the end, they become blind, and he can see.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of that contrast of, when they do the kind of the Silence of the Lambs down in the basement almost. But also you get I love the necessity, the need for low tracking takes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which I love because there's not a lot. It's almost like you have a skill, but you don't want to overhit all the time with it. But they use enough of it to make it more appealing because you get a lot of down on the ground camera shots.
Well, and I'll be real with you. When I saw the film initially, I didn't notice any of the cinematography the first time I watched it because I was just so in. Like, I was just in this movie, not even really thinking about it as a movie. Like, once they get in and the tension ramps up, it was only upon a second and a third watch, like later on, that I was able to really appreciate some of the skill that's at play. And it's again, when the cinematography is so good that you don't realize it's cinematography. When the music is so good that you don't realize you're listening to it, or the special effects, like how, Jurassic Park's dinosaur still looks great almost 30 years later. Like
in the rain,
makes you forget that it's even there.
Right, in the rain and bright sunny days. So
yeah, and I think that's where this film wins, is that you actually forget how well made it is because you're not even paying attention to that.
Right. Yeah, and it's like contrast. They're all trapped. Everybody in this movie is trapped, and they're trying to find a way to escape or avenue out, right? Or want to be able to break in. Keys. I love the emphasis of keys in this. It's peppered in. It's almost very Alfred Hitchcock of using a prop that you get on the lay is how to get access.
Well, and again, back to the sound part of it, the key is, there's not a more recognizable sound than if you see someone pull out keys. Even if you're not actually listening to the sound of it, that rattle of keys. Like, there's so many pieces of sound you don't even really think about in day-to-day life. But when you're put in that situation, you see a key come out, it heightens your tension. It's a key. That's what I liked about it, was that it heightens your tension with simplicity. Even that little beeper button where she breaks into the house, and she's got the thing to turn it off, and there's that little beep 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 that she's kind of trying to find and stuff as she's turning it off. That's even just a tense scene too, because she knows she has 30 seconds to figure out where this thing is.
And it's clever how you trap a dog.
That's true.
I didn't think about that, but when you got a
Camaro,
I think it's a Camaro. You trap the dog, and the dog is another play of emphasis because not only did he have to overcome the blind man, but he has a dog too. Yep. So it's almost like, okay, you overcome that obstacle, there's another element obstacle, and it has a necessity jump scare. It's an important jump scare. Not only is it a jump scare, it's a foreshadowing jump scare, which I love.
And what I think is neat about the jump scares in the film, because
They're
we live
needed.
in a time, we live in a time where jump scares are all the rage now in horror films. Again,
Right, you
kind of
take a drink like you
resurfaced,
saw, everybody's
you know?
looking for it. But here, it's necessity, it's
Yeah.
a need, it's foreshadowed.
When every jump scare is an actual scare. Like that, there's a scene where one of them turns the corner and all of a sudden he's just staring at them, and that scared me. And that made me jump in my seat. But here's the thing, that is part of the story. Like they turned and they saw him, they knew he was there. Of course, him being blind, he might be aware of someone in the house. Like he's kind of like at that point he's not really certain that there's someone there yet. But it's a great sequence for that because every jump scare in the film is required for heightening the tension and moving the story. There's not a single one where like someone throws a cat out there
just to do it, right?
Yeah.
I get mad if you're doing a jump scare just to do it because you think the audience is falling asleep.
Yeah, there's a line in the show Community where they're actually making fun of horror films and they're walking down a hallway and like I think they get attacked by like 5 cats and he's like the one character goes, "Is somebody just throwing them?" Like, and it's like that's my hatred for jump scares. It's like that they have a place and they do work. They're very effective and that's why people use them. Yeah. But in this film, they're more effective because they actually matter to the story.
Right, and you got a lot of, even with the shot of her in the car with the dog, which is simple. It's simple to do, but how they film it, they actually put the camera in the trunk. They do very minimally, I would say 5 or 6 cuts. And that's tough to do that much dynamic. And not only train the dog to go in there, and you have to show the maneuvering of a trapping to make it clever, but very crafted storytelling for film.
Yeah. Well, and as a storyteller, he makes you forget. Makes you forget simplicity, and he makes you, or sometimes he makes you forget. Like he makes things seem simpler than they are. What I mean specifically is there's a scene where Jane is like standing pretty far away from. Right, Jane Levy, who plays Rocky, is standing far away from the blind man, and she goes, like she's in the bright sky, and she's like, "What are you gonna do now?" And he lets the dog out, and you're like, "Oh my god, I forgot the dog was there!" Like, "Oh no," because you get on the side of like, "Oh, she's got him," and then he surprises her again. And I love again like Stephen Lang's character is so full of surprises that kind of, and especially some big surprises as the film comes to a close, which I heard some people didn't like. I really enjoyed like how absolutely insane it goes.
And of course, I like the shot of the end because it's so intimate. This claustrophobic intimacy of the whole movie. And then the end, you have a little more breathing room, a little more, and of course, when you have 3 people that do a job, that work together, 3, that you're going to have some friction, hierarchy friction. Obviously, Money thinks he's the leader of this whole thing. I think Rocky's kind of the brains of it all, and of course, they need Alex because he has all the tools. Yeah,
Alex is the tools, but Money's the real tool.
Reversing.
But I like Dylan Minnette in this film. I became aware of Dylan Minnette on the show Lost. He was in the final season of the show, but then he kept kind of reappearing in things like Let Me In playing the bully. He was in Goosebumps playing the lead. He's a very likable, I would call Dylan Minnette's kind of like the boy next door. Very fresh looking. Right? Yeah, like he's very understandable and he's kind of got I don't want to say ageless. Like you're not sure if he's a teen or if he's in his 20s and he's played every single age.
Because when I first time watching it, it's like, what the hell are you doing, kid? This is obviously just gonna
no playtime for you.
This is a little too new, a little too fresh for doing something like this.
And that's probably why he's able to be manipulated by Rocky and Money. Because I mean, there is a genuine friendship where they don't realize that they're taking advantage of him.
No, right. Money tells him, "Stay in the friend zone, buddy."
Yeah. Well, he even uses. I think he unpurposefully uses that Alex has a thing for Rocky against him, where he's like, "Dude, I gotta get her out of here. She's got to get out of this area and start a new life somewhere." And like, I think Money genuinely uses that without realizing that he's pushing Alex towards the door.
Tool, right? Yeah.
So, Alex has the tools. Money's the tool.
So there's the necessity for each can't do this on their own. Each needs somebody else to do this, and of course there's the friction, a hierarchy, especially when you're committing crimes because you can't trust everybody. Even though this is based in Detroit, I think a lot of the movie was actually shot in Hungary, the country. Because you can get away. I mean, most of it's done in the house, so you just find a location, but you also can find a beat up Camaro for cheap that you could film in the movie, which fits in the environment. There are some scenes of Detroit in there. I think there's a lot of like what we call second unit photography. Setting the stage, setting the mood kind of thing. I think if I'm correct, the sequel also shot in Hungary. I believe so. So it's kind of like a go back there, but I think it's a nice level of believability to be Detroit because again, you're shooting mostly in a house, but
but where you shoot it, you can kind of really play with that kind of tone and visual appeal.
You can get away with it at different locations if he's, if something is supposed to be in Detroit, but you can go out of country and shoot it. You can sometimes get away with it. And if it doesn't really work well, like Fear.com, it did not work well at all. They shot a movie in Holland, and it's supposed to be New York City. It just didn't work at all.
I always think of Pumpkinhead 3. Yes, there's a Pumpkinhead 3.
What?
Which was shot like outside of the U.S. and it's just so apparent, like that even just the actors they got to be in the film, so many of them are like they can't crack an American accent, but it's supposed to be the South. It's again, like if you have 4 actors in the movie, there really are 4 actors. Like, so you can get away with putting them all in the movie, and getting them in there and having them. You move them to some place. You take the cheaper option of being able to film somewhere else, and I think it works.
So overall, it's a well-crafted, very deceivingly simple horror movie.
Yes.
That's effective. I think it's one of the best ones of 2016.
Yeah, I think there's certain things that happen in the film that are going to disturb you, but I think it's also a kind of a more accessible horror film in terms of its general conceit. It's a very simple idea that you're shocked no one else has done this yet before. Yeah. It was when it came out as my number 3 of 2016. It was my number 3 favorite film of the year. This was before I'd seen most of the Oscar pictures, so I'm sure it jumbled around a little bit after that. But
just thinking off the top of my head, it's going to be in the top 20 for me.
Definitely,
I don't know if I put a higher up. Yeah.
But it's an incredibly tight, and I love when movies can use 88 minutes and really ramp in a lot in that time period. It never feels like there's any wasted juice in the runtime. It just keeps going the entire time through, hits the end, and you finally realize you haven't been breathing the whole movie.
And there's enough little, because you read the plot, you realize some of it, this is what it's really about. But there's enough more into it than on the surface.
Yeah, definitely.
It's deceivingly simple.
Yeah. So we both enjoyed Don't Breathe, and in fact, any day now we're going to see Don't Breathe 2 hitting theaters.
Right,
so
yeah.
It's pretty exciting to know
Sam Raimi said it was one of the best sequel scripts he's ever written, and why not go with it? So I'm really enticed what they want to do with this.
I'm enticed because I've read the synopsis for the sequel, and I don't know how you can make that movie. I don't know how that movie is going to make you feel watching it, but apparently people just adored the script. So I'm super excited for it. I've been kind of avoiding any trailers or too much knowledge on it, but definitely we both enjoyed this film. I think we're both in to see what the heck happens next with this iconic horror villain.
So many variables you can do with it.
Yeah.
Especially with that ending.
Yeah. So we're both definitely on the Don't Breathe train, but we want to know, what do you think? Comment below. Don't forget to breathe while you do it. You can actually do that. We won't judge you. And like I mentioned before, don't forget to like, subscribe. Check out that Patreon too. We got so many cool options on there that are available. And
we'll love to hear from you.
To work alongside you for this show. That's what this show is all about, is getting the conversation going.
Yes.
So once again, guys, you can find my film reviews on GoFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and be careful. Who do you think could be a good victim?
Yeah.
Because you might be the victim.